Have you ever wanted to dynamically pull in posts from another website and allow users to filter them without writing a single line of code? Well, with Crocoblock's Jet Engine and Jet Smart Filters, it's not just possible, it's easy. Hey everyone, I'm Andrew, and in today's tutorial I'll show you how to filter listings with data sourced from an external site using the REST API query type in Jet Engine. If you find this tutorial helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Before we get started, there are a couple of things to check. First, make sure Jet Engine and Jet Smart filters are installed and activated. Then go to Jet Engine settings and enable the REST API listing module. After that's done, head over to the REST API Endpoints tab. This is where we create an endpoint, which is basically a URL that pulls in specific data. So for this tutorial I want to import job vacancy posts from a page built with Crocoblock's labor time template. To do that, I'll start by visiting the page where all job listings are displayed and copying its URL. This URL alone isn't enough to fetch data via the REST API. To turn it into a proper REST API endpoint, I need to append a specific path, a standard REST API convention in WordPress. By default, the post value in this path tells WordPress to fetch regular posts. But since I want to pull job listings, I need to replace posts with the custom post type slug, in this case job vacancies, as it appears in the original page's URL. If we paste this REST API endpoint URL into the browser address bar, we'll see a bulk of data returned. It includes basic post details like the date, ID, slug, and taxonomy information represented by term IDs. When dealing with custom post types created with Crocoblock, they are automatically available for the REST API queries. However, this availability can be restricted using a toggle in the advanced settings of the custom post type. As for the meta fields, they are not available for fetching by default, but enabling them is simple. You just need to turn on the dedicated toggle in their settings. For the job vacancies I'm fetching, a few custom fields are already included in the API response, like job description and salary data. These will be useful when displaying the listings later. Now let's get back to the REST API endpoint section of our website. Here I enter the name I want to use for the endpoint and paste the API endpoint URL into the designated field. Next, I click the button to send a sample request. If everything is set up correctly, we should see a green confirmation note. This means the system can now fetch the required data from the source website. With this task completed, we're ready to move on to the next steps. First, we'll create a REST API query with query clauses for each filtering variable. Then we'll set up the filters themselves. And finally, we'll build the listing, which we will later embed on the page along with the filters. And although you might be familiar with these processes, they require a few non-standard tweaks when working with REST APIs. Head over to WordPress dashboard, Jet Engine, Query Builder, and hit Add New. Give your query a name and set the query type to REST API query. Now, in the REST API query section, pick the endpoint from the From Endpoint dropdown. Turn on the Preview Results toggle. This activates a side panel where you'll see how many posts the query is pulling. At this point, it only fetches 10 posts by default, but we can fix that. Click Add New to create a query clause. In the key field, type per_page. And in the value field, enter the maximum number of posts you want to fetch. Hit Update Query and you'll see the post count update. Now you're fetching all available posts. Let's create the next query clause for filtering posts by taxonomies. In the key field, you can use any value you want. For the value field, click the database icon and select Jet Smart Filters query macro. Set type to plain query variable, and for the variable name, enter the name of the taxonomy from the fetched post if you want to create a category-based filter. Choose plain as the result format and then hit apply. I'll do the same for another query clause as I want to add one more filtering taxonomy. Finally, click Update Query and you're done with that part. For building filters, head to the WordPress dashboard, Smart Filters, Add New. Give your filter a name and pick the filter type. I'm using radio for this one. In the data source dropdown, choose where your options will come from for filtering the REST API data. For example, I'm filtering job listings by category, but since the REST API stores these as numeric IDs and they would show up that way if sourced directly from the endpoint, I created a jet engine glossary with category names as labels and their IDs as values. So I select jet engine glossary as the data source and pick the correct glossary from the following dropdown. In the query variable field, I add the taxonomy name, in this case vacancy type, to link the filter with the REST API data. The first filter is ready, and I'll do the same thing for filtering post by another available taxonomy. Now let's get the listing for the post set up. Head over to the WordPress dashboard, navigate to Jet Engine, Listings, and hit Add New Item. In the pop-up, choose Query Builder as the listing source, select your custom query, name your listing, and pick a view, Elementor, Bricks, or Block Editor. I'm using Elementor here. Once that's set, click Create Listing Item. We have to build the layout with Jet Engine's dynamic field widgets. Since we're pulling data from a REST API, things work a little differently compared to regular site listings, as in most cases dynamic fields need special callbacks to display correctly. For displaying the post name, the source should be post term user object data, as for all dynamic fields. In the object field dropdown, find your REST API section and select title. At first you'll see an error message suggesting a few callback options. In this case, choose checkbox field values callback and the title will display correctly. If you want to display categories, grab the category field from the REST API in the object field dropdown. Then for the callback, choose Get Labels by Glossary Data and select the glossary you have prepared earlier. That way, the category names from the glossary field labels appear instead of just IDs. When working with meta fields that are open for display in REST API endpoint, things are a bit different too. In the object field dropdown, find your REST API section and select Meta. Set the callback to getChildElement from object array and enter the exact meta field name in the child item name field. It might take some trial and error, but that's just part of working with REST API data. Once everything looks good, I'll adjust the styling of the dynamic fields and the listing container and hit publish. Alright, so now we've got all four pieces in place. Creating the REST API endpoints, building the REST API query, setting up filters, and building the listing to display the fetched data. Now it's time to bring everything together. Let's create a new page, drop in the listing grid with our selected listing, and add two filters with Jet Engine set as provider in this Filter For dropdown. A bit of styling for the filters and the grid, hit publish, and that's it. Let's check out how it looks on the front end. We now see the imported data displayed in the listing grid, with radio filters letting us refine the results using a combination of two taxonomies, just as expected. Everything is working seamlessly: REST API data, filters, and listings. If this helped you fit the puzzle pieces together, let us know in the comments. Got questions? Drop them below. And if you're into this kind of content, stick around, there's plenty more coming. Cheers!